Thank you for joining us in today's TRUE webinar to hear about Robotics Process Automation, or RPA. My name is Michelle Chung. I'm the director of TRUE, a public-private partnership with the goal of helping organizations accelerate their adoption of technology to strengthen our organizations to become more resilient and productive. If you want to see how a help desk decreases resolution time by 33%, or how you can visualize your data to make better data-driven decisions, TRUE would like to support you. We know that this can be an investment, and through this network of like-minded individuals, we leverage each other's knowledge and experiences to help each other get the most out of technology and data while creating an ecosystem where we can support each other. Some days you're sharing solutions, and other days you're benefiting from someone else's knowledge. But through it all, organizations in Hawaii strengthen through this collaboration. In supporting Hawaii's digital transformation, data and innovation efforts, it supports TRUE's mission of creating tech-enabled jobs here in Hawaii. TRUE is an initiative of the Hawaii Executive Collaborative. If you're interested to learn how you or your organization can be a part of TRUE or see other use cases and solutions, please visit us at hec.org/true or connect with me. I'd like to introduce and thank the other organizations who help to bring you these events. HTDC, Hawaii Technology Development Corp, is a state agency attached to DBED. Their mandate is to grow the tech economy and workforce here in Hawaii, and our missions are very much aligned. Entrepreneurs Sandbox is a co-working facility here in Akaka'ako, owned by HTDC and managed by Box Jelly. It's Hawaii's front door to innovation, where we stand up technology, showcase it, and provide an open, collaborative space. Today's webinar, again, is on RPA. Organizations are turning to RPA to automate tedious, repetitive tasks and rule-based processes. Time saved through RPA can enable businesses to devote more time to serving customers or other high-value work. The data gathered through RPA can also be leveraged for valuable insight. Today, we have two people who implemented an RPA solution, and we invite them to share their journey and their lessons learned with us. Just a really quick agenda. We're going to start off with a chat with the two people involved in the project, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A, so you can ask them your questions. Feel free to send in your questions during the session through the Q&A function. The session is being recorded and will be made available, and at the end of the webinar, you'll get access to a survey. We'd really like to hear from you and get your feedback. It'll only take 2 minutes to fill out. And with that, I would like to stop the screen share and invite my speakers to come on today. If you could please enable your cameras. Welcome.
Hi, Michelle.
Hello. Joining us today is Franco. Franco started his career off with Ernst & Young and Deloitte & Touche, and over the next 20 years, he gained experience in financial analysis, planning, mergers and acquisitions, and much more. In the 90s, he became the CFO for Clinical Laboratories of Hawaii, and assisted them in growing their business acquisition of labs, it seems like all over the world, in the mainland and in Southeast Asia, and with the sale of CLH Labs to a large publicly owned company in the 2000s. He spent 25 years in healthcare and has brought in experiences into strategic planning, developing operating business plans, and negotiating major customer contracts, leading revenue enhancement and cost reduction initiatives. Welcome, Franco.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to introduce Clyde. So Clyde is a Chief Information and Strategy Officer at DataHouse. Clyde's entire career has been in information technology, starting as a college intern in 1980. Throughout his, get this, 41-year career at DataHouse. Clyde's
You thought it was a typo, right? It's not a typo.
No, it's wonderful. Clyde's worked in all aspects of IT, including software development, project management, management consulting, and executive leadership positions as CTO, president, and CEO. Clyde's worked with numerous government agencies and commercial businesses in Hawaii and in the US and in Japan, and helped to expand DataHouse's business in healthcare, government, education, and banking. In his current role as Chief Information and Strategy Officer, Clyde works with DataHouse consultants, customers, and partners to plan and deliver value to stakeholders throughout innovative approaches and solutions. I'd like to welcome you both. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Clyde. Maybe he can tell us a little about what RPA is.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity to share. And I created a slide deck that might help to explain it. And then we can make the slide deck available to whoever wants it. So let me share my screen. Are you seeing it okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is just an overview of robotic process automation, or RPA. Let's start with this picture here. So this represents, all the various systems and databases that, are in organizations. And, it looks like a bowl of spaghetti, but it's actually fairly typical. Yeah, if we think about, all the different systems that we interact with, either it's, systems or applications or websites or files, on a daily basis. And the focus of IT throughout my career, and I feel responsible for developing this bowl of spaghetti, that it's been focused on really adding to this picture by adding applications and databases to improve efficiencies or automate process. But not a lot of attention was paid maybe to the operation of it once it's implemented. So as over time, as more and more systems are introduced into the organization, then it becomes more challenging, to operate, and people, have to deal with more systems, and there's also the need to exchange information, between these systems. So that kind of gets to RPA. RPA is not trying to add more databases or systems to this picture. It's really to try to make it more manageable, improve the operations of it, and improve the exchanging or sharing of data or connections with these systems. So that's kind of the intent of RPA. It's not to create a new application. It's to make your current applications more effective. So so what is RPA? There's a lot of definitions out there, but these are the three themes that are pretty common throughout all the definitions. And the first one is really it's a user interaction tool. So it's a piece of software. It's not a robot. It's not like a physical robot, but it does emulate like what people do. It emulates human interactions with these digital systems. Like if you think about how you interact with your systems today, it's through your keyboard and your mouse. So these RPA tools can emulate that and actually play back or present keyboard and mouse movements and clicks to the application, just like a human can. And it's meant to automate a defined set of tasks. So this technology is not brand new. A lot of forms of this technology has been around for many years, in fact, decades. And it's been used a lot in automated testing. And I remember 10, 20 years ago, building applications that can scrape data off of screens. So some of this technology and concepts have been around for a while. But the problem with how it's been in the past is it's been always very costly and labor intensive to do that. So it makes it not practical and affordable for many use cases. So that brings it to the second point about RPA. It's a rapid, low-code development environment to to develop these RPA automations. And so that by being faster to develop and having the tools to do that, it reduces the time to create the RPA and train it. And that way you can get faster return on investments and faster time to value. So that's an important point. That's where the advancements, I think, over the years have really been in this area. And then the third point is, it does interact with systems like people do, but unlike people, it just works 24/7, doesn't take off. It generally, does it, how it was trained. It's also non-intrusive, meaning it doesn't intrude on the operation of the system so that you don't have to modify it. And that way you can leverage existing investments made in applications and infrastructure. So these are the three points about RPA. This shows some example of some of the tasks that can be automated with RPA. And when you look through this, some of these are very, they should be all pretty familiar because these are what people are doing today. Is when you're dealing with systems, whether it be a financial system, a human resource, logging into the system, entering information and data entry, reading and writing to databases. Those are fairly routine tasks that can be automated. There's also like personal productivity tasks like email and moving files and folders, copy and pasting. Things like that can be automated as well. And there's tasks that may involve external systems outside the organizations like websites. So being able to interact with those external systems, whether it's to retrieve information from them or to put information into those systems, that's other examples of tasks that can be automated with RPA. So these are just examples, but pretty much what you think of being able to do with a keyboard and a mouse is what can be automated. So what are the benefits? The one that most people focus on, and because it's obvious, it's less reducing staff workload, because it does perform the tasks of what people would do. That would, maybe the RPA could handle the routine, kind of redundant work that is being done, which may free the staff up to do, higher value activities, or may avoid, hiring more people to perform certain functions. So that's definitely one of the values that people look for in RPA. But there's others, improving the accuracy, because once the RPA is trained, it's going to perform it the same way all the time. So it may help in improving accuracy. Faster process, if the RPA can perform the task, faster because it works 24/7, or because maybe people don't have time to get around to do it as fast enough. This would be an example like in billing or claims filing. The faster you can get a bill out or file a claim, the faster you can get paid. So there's a benefit of improved cash flow. So that's what faster process type benefits would be. Interesting part about RPA is this creating space for innovation, because it does open up or enable different types of solutions that may have not been possible before. And we'll talk about some of those examples when we get into the use cases. But there's a number of benefits. Franco, I don't know if you want to talk about any one of these. Are you there, Franco?
Pardon me?
Franco, you there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I think reduced costs, a faster process, all of these benefits really, Pharmacare benefit from it.
So how does RPA work? This is a physical view of RPA, and it's delivered in the form of a platform. So there's many RPA platform vendors that are in the market. Some popular ones like UiPath. They all of them have these components to it. So there's a development component that you use to train the RPA to perform the functions like a user would. And then that could be, through recording what the user is actually doing, or like coding it. That would be part of the robot development component. Then there's an orchestrator component, or some form of administration or management component that, that schedules all the RPAs to run on a, at the right time, at the right place, so that it can be done without, having to do that manually. So it can be scheduled, a certain frequency or time of day or day of week. And then there's a runtime component. So there's agents that actually execute the RPA, and they can be executed on different platforms. I mean, it could be done from a server. It could be done, in a cloud, or it could be done, on user's desktop, very much like how a user would interact with the systems on their desktop. And what the RPA would do would be to interact with these applications that it was trained for. So these are just examples of them, but it's pretty much any application or website is what they interact with. So this is the physical view of what an RPA is. Okay, so the next one is about use cases. So this is important to think about because when you think about it, RPA can do anything with a mouse and a keyboard, which can be a lot of stuff. But you probably want to focus on certain use cases that have these characteristics. The first one is stable and standardized. And typically this would be like some mature system or systems that perform very consistently, very stable. This could be typically like a back-end financial system, payroll system, and you have experienced users that know how to use it, so that they have the knowledge to train the RPA to do what it needs to do. And because it's stable, it's not changing as much, because every time it changes, there's a potential for changes that are needed on the RPA side. Like, for example, if additional screens in a flow is introduced, then the RPA would have to be trained for that. So that's one of the ideal characteristics when you think about use cases. The other one is high volume, low complexity. Low complexity meaning like it's most of the costs of developing an RPA is in the training and development. So low complexity would mean faster training, probably lower costs for development. And high volume would be, you'll be able to leverage that over many transactions, so you can spread the investment over a lot more volume, which would give you, faster ROI. The third one is task, not process. So, RPA is really intended to automate specific tasks in a process, even though you could conceive of an RPA that can handle multiple tasks and connect them together into a process. But there may be other technologies that are more suited for certain tasks in a process. So it's good to identify the specific tasks that the RPA would be best suited for. And we'll talk more about this when we get into the Pharmacare project, because we'll talk about the process that we use as a use case, and within the process, the specific tasks that we use RPA for. The last one here is interesting. This is kind of relates to the opens up innovation. Is many kind of, especially legacy systems, don't have interfaces so that you can automate the interactions with them through programming, application programming interfaces, or even like batch interfaces. And you don't want to go directly to the database to do any kind of updates. It's okay to read it, but you may introduce errors, or you may lose integrity because you're bypassing the application. So many times with some systems, the user interface is the only way to tap into it. Websites are another example of this too. If you don't have control of the website, you're just dealing with the web page, and that's the only way to get to it. But with an RPA, you can go through that interface and extract data or populate data through the RPA. So it does, open up opportunities to connect systems and automate certain processes. So that's, these are some of the example use cases or characteristics of these use cases to look at. And as far as what are the specific use cases, things like back office data entry transactions, these are usually the high volume, very stable ones. Could be in billing, account maintenance, payments. Those are, typical use case. It could be front office, front forms, document process, filling in forms, processing documents that are routine and consistent. So those are other examples. Data consolidation is another example, very common, I think, for, I think we can relate to, sometimes needing to go to different systems to pull data. And, maybe like you're looking at one system to pull certain data, and you go to another system to pull some data, and you're putting it all in a spreadsheet for consolidated reporting, like financial reporting, like an example of that. That can be automated, through RPA by, logging into those different systems and going to the right screens and pulling the data that you need and putting it into one place, whether it be another system or a database or a spreadsheet or whatever it is. And then, verifying or calculations is, like if you need to verify something on a website and it's very routine, like vendor, compliance or, onboarding or recruitment, there's, ways to automate that so that, you don't have to log into those websites and check. You can have the RPA do that. So these are just examples, but there's, many, many more. This is my last slide, and I know, the big question is, how much does it cost, for RPA? And, this T-shirt size framework, might be helpful. So we kind of categorize these RPA projects into small, medium, and large. And, the small, would be in terms of steps, like 10 to 100 steps. So think about steps being like you logging in, you going to this menu, you're pulling up this screen, you're entering some data. Each one of those are steps. And, it's usually a single task, like a particular one transaction, and it's interacting like with one application, one target application. The data is structured, so it's in a digital form, and it's in discrete fields. And roughly for that type of use case, 3 to 5 weeks might be typical. In terms of person months, 1.5. When we talk about the Pharmacare project, that's what it fell into this category. And even though it was like one task, one application, we had 58 steps that we had to automate. So that fell into this category. And so, you can take the person months and, figure out based on whatever rate you're using, whether it's internal or using external consultants. But if it's external, it's probably, in the under the 50K type of budget, like 20 to 50K for the small. For the medium, you get into more steps, automating more tasks or transactions, interacting with more applications. So that, is, a longer implementation cycle to develop the RPA and to implement it. So 6 to 10 weeks, roughly 3 person months. I would guess 50 to 100K in terms of a budget for the medium. And then when you get into the large, that's where it can be, all over the map. I mean, many steps, many tasks, many applications. The data could be structured or maybe non-structured or non-digital, like paper that needs to be scanned and put into OCR, and using AI to automate that. Longer implementation and quite a long, more person months. So in the 100K plus range for that. So I hope this would be helpful to just think about in terms of budget. But Michelle, that's about my overview of RPA. That's what I had put together.
Oh, great, thank you. And I love that you're providing actual numbers because that helps people think about whether or not they can embark on an effort like this. So
Yeah.
Franco, would you like to share how Pharmacare came
Sure.
about deciding to pursue RPA?
Sure. So Clyde, I'm getting a delay on the slide, so let me know when the slide is up.
Okay.
So I know when to talk. Otherwise, I'm gonna like wait 20 seconds. Out here in Kailua there.
Okay. No, you're up. The Pharmacare slide is up there about us.
Okay. Okay. So a little bit about Pharmacare, what we do, and how we ended up using an RPA. But last week in the paper, they talked about Natsunoya Tea House being 100 years old this year. So yeah, I was kind of impressed with that. And I asked our marketing department to give us a little history of Pharmacare. I didn't know these facts, but Pharmacare will be 94 years old this year. It's a third generation firm. So the major shareholder, Byron Yoshino, his grandfather started the drugstore back in 1927. I didn't even know they had drugstores back then. But one thing that Pharmacare is noted for is that they pioneered home infusion back in the 80s. And so you know how everything starts on the mainland, the East Coast, rolls west, and in Hawaii, we usually get it last, right? So Hawaii got home infusion in the 1980s. And so you ask, what is home infusion? So if you have a severe infection or you have a cancer patient, the severe infection, you probably use antibiotics introduced intravenously, or for a cancer patient, chemotherapy intravenously. So in the old days, you only could get that to the hospital. And so in the 1980s, Pharmacare brought out home infusion, where you administer the drugs in the patient's home. So we would send out a nurse to the patient's home, and you'd actually teach the caregiver or the patient, sometimes themselves, how to administer the drugs. And the nurse would go there every so often, check the lines, bring supplies. And the insurance companies love that because it's way cheaper providing this service at home versus in the hospital. Another unique thing about Pharmacare is it is the largest, or probably one of the largest, local independent pharmacies. So I'm not talking about Long's or Walgreens, national chains, but Pharmacare has about 200 employees. They employ pharmacists, yes, nurses, yes, with the home infusion, and dietitians. And you might say, why dietitians? Because Pharmacare has another business line that provides enteral and incontinence to patients. And when I started at Pharmacare, I kind of wanted to understand. I knew nothing about the pharmacy business. So I asked Byron, I said, can I do frontline things to get in there what pharmacy is about? And I didn't want to go into pharmacy because I might screw up and dish out the wrong the prescriptions, right? So I ended up delivering for 1 week, and it was eye-opening to me. Because not only did I deliver drugs that people depended on, but the enteral. I didn't realize how many people cannot eat orally through their mouth, but they had a tube in their stomach, and the enteral is how they survived. And it was surprising to me that even newborn babies, we delivered enteral to newborn babies on there. So it amazed me and surprised me how many people needed this service, how important it was, and their lives depended on it, really. So our marketing department likes to say that Pharmacare provides services from pediatrics to geriatrics. Pediatrics because we have the outpatient pharmacy on Kapilani Medical Center. And then we also have another business line that services nursing homes. So that's the pediatrics to geriatrics. Pharmacare has been in the Hawaii top 250 since 2009. And for the last 3 years, they've been voted the best drugstore pharmacy. So next slide, and let me know when it's on, Clyde.
Okay.
Okay, so I kind of mentioned the services that Pharmacare does, the retail pharmacies like CVS, the specialty pharmacy. It's kind of a new branch, but those are really expensive medications. Example is, I found out there was a medication for gout is $20,000 per treatment. Can you imagine that? $20,000? Home infusion, we talked about that. Ambulatory infusion suites. So you can get infusion in the hospital, your home. A third option is to go to our ambulatory infusion suite at the airport. We have a site in Hilo. End of this month, we'll have one in Maui, and in a couple months on Kauai. So rather than going to the hospital home, some patients rather go someplace quiet. We have a nice reclining chair. You can watch movies or listen to music. I already mentioned we do nursing homes, enteral, incontinence, and really what I wanted to get into where the RPA came out was the vaccine program. So next slide, and let me know when it's on.
Okay, it's on.
Okay, so about 5 or 6 years ago, Pharmacare started doing vaccination programs for employers, businesses, and schools, at their site. And it was a matter of convenience, because when you think about it, you get up in the morning, you probably take the kids to school, go to work. After work, you pick up the kids, pick up dinner or cook dinner. That's Monday through Friday. And on the weekends, that's personal time. So it was really a matter of convenience to provide like flu shots at your employer's office. And it was very popular. It grew from a couple hundred flu shots to, I think the last year was about 6,000. So we're doing about 80 or 90 employers. Next slide.
Okay.
So then the pandemic happened, right? On there. And what happened was employers didn't want the flu clinics on their site, right? Because we used to do the flu clinics in a room. So, you don't have social distancing on there. And then more employees were working from home. So they're not on campus, right? Another thing happened, we did about 6,000 flu shots. The Department of Health called up Pharmacare and said, hey, the nursing homes, we have these care home patients that can't get out of there. So can you go to the care homes? And that's one of our pharmacists giving a care home patient a vaccine. Go out to the care homes and vaccinate them. These care homes maybe had 2, 3, or 4 patients. And we did that. And the Department of Health came back and said, hey, you guys did such a good job. Can you do the airport pod? So what is the airport pod? They said, well, can you do all the employees for Department of Transportation and the employees for Hawaiian Airlines, United Airlines, and American Airlines? And we're going to give you 2,500 vaccines a week until you vaccinate them all. So from doing 6,000 shots a year, we figured the COVID vaccine would be like 30,000, from 6 to 36,000. Okay, next slide.
Okay.
So Pharmacare had to reinvent itself with the pandemic. Under the old process, we did the flu clinics indoors, only did 6,000. Everything was paper also. The registration forms are all done on paper. We hired somebody to transfer the information from the registration forms to an Excel spreadsheet. That was used as the log for each clinic. It was also used to bill the flu shots, because we had an antiquated pharmacy system that did prescription billing fine, but it couldn't do flu shot billing because it's a medical claim. So the immunization team kind of reinvented themselves. They offered employers outdoor clinics, but really what the winner was drive-through. So examples like Punahou, I think we did 1,500 to 2,000 flu shots. And they said, we want you to come on the weekend through your cars. So we set up 4 or 5 stations. One day, I think we did 500 or 700. And the marketing department found this form called Jot form. That was a PDF online, and you could schedule appointments. The old way was the employer said, hey, Pharmacare is here, 9 to 3, go down and get your vaccine shot. And so, there's no control over the crowd. But with the appointment, we could control the crowd coming in. And that worked really well. Another thing Jot form did was it transferred the data from the registration form onto an Excel spreadsheet. We initially were going to contract with Pharmacare to build the RPA to build HMSA, because HMSA is like over half of our flu shots. But then we said, you know, we need a new pharmacy system anyway that can get into the 21st century and build some flu shots. So we decided to do the RPA with a new pharmacy system that could build flu shots. But we're still missing the piece to automate the input from the Excel spreadsheet into the pharmacy system.
So that brings us to the project. I can cover the RPA project that we did with Pharmacare. And let me start with the team that we had. So our team was, the Pharmacare side had executive sponsorship, subject matter experts on the business process, subject matter experts that knew the pharmacy system, as well as IT. On the data side, you know, we have a strategic partner, FPT, and we assembled a team of DataHouse and FPT members. FPT is a very large global IT service company that has a very mature RPA practice. They have about 500 RPA engineers. They support all the major RPA platforms. They have partnerships with them and certifications, you know, with them. So together, DataHouse and FPT put together a team to install and train the RPA and to support it. So we have project management, business analysis, RPA development, testing, and support. And all this was delivered in a global model. You know, we had people on the US mainland, here in Hawaii, and then in Vietnam. And our Pharmacare is comfortable with a global delivery model because they use it for other parts of their business as well. And we did it 100% online, you know, no physical face-to-face meetings.
Clyde, I just wanted to let you know we have about 10 minutes left. So we want to make sure we get through more of it. So I'm going to ask you to just maybe go a little faster through the details so we can talk about the outcomes also.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll cover it. This is the process that Franco just went through, and he mentioned, you know, all the different steps to schedule and to receive the you know, vaccinations, and then the steps to file the claim. But this is the point I want to make. The RPA task we automated was this part of it. There were other technologies for the other parts. Jotform for that, SharePoint, I think, was in here, in the pharmacy system. So this is what our focus of RPA was. And we essentially took the data that was captured to the electronic form and scheduling. We navigate the pharmacy system, and then we update the data in the system so that a claim can be filed by the system. It was all on-premise because of HIPAA compliant. We wanted to keep all the data within their network. And then we used a variety of an RPA platform. In this case, it was FPT's platform, Jotform, SharePoint, and the RX30 pharmacy system. So our project plan was 5 weeks. It fit the small project size, and you know, it involved these basic steps. And the activities within those steps was to first, you know, set up the environment and to capture the requirements so that the RP could be trained. And you know, the deliverables for this step was pretty straightforward. It's really taking or capturing the steps, whether it's through screenshots or recordings of the user operating the system. And then there's also understanding of the source data, any kind of mapping tables or validation rules that we want to perform. That was part of the requirements gathering. Then once we get that, then the RPA can be designed and developed. That was the development step. So that was like 2 weeks for that, 2 weeks for the requirements. And then the final would be to have a user acceptance test where we we test the RPA to make sure it works properly. So those were the activities of a project. Technically, the infrastructure was, we connected to their site over a secure tunnel, and the RPA was installed on their servers within their environment, and it had direct network connectivity to their pharmacy system, as well as the source data from the JotForm and SharePoint application. So this is some of the challenges and lessons learned. Franco, if you can cover maybe the first two, and I'll cover the next two.
Okay, so you know, we had to rush this project because of pandemic, but looking back, two lessons learned. When we did the JotForm, that was great. But you know, we ran a couple shots and it worked fine. The RPA worked fine. We tried to run a clinic, a flu clinic, and then we got into some issues. And what it was some of the fields were left blank, like the zip code. So lesson learned is, you know, how some of the applications for registration, it's a required field with that red asterisk. We should have that. So make sure every field is included, and maybe hardwire some. I notice now they ask for name, address, then zip code. And once you put in the zip code, it automatically field puts in the city and the state. The second thing is, looking back, we probably should have done the RPA with billing HMSA only, a simpler process, because it's a new system. Nobody knew what the new system was doing, and we have a new RPA. So to this day, we're still having a little issues because the COVID vaccine, there's changes by the federal government and changes by the vendor itself. So it's getting very close, but it's you know, it's just difficult if you don't really know the system. So a new system, I would advise not doing it with a new system you don't know.
And the third one is, you know, you need to define the requirements, both from the user interface and technical, you know, because there are considerations for, you know, web applications versus like terminal type applications. The RPA, you know, has to interact with a different type of interface, and certain platforms are better than others for that. You know, there's also like sometimes you have to go through Citrix or remote desktop to get to applications, and that's you know, that's an important requirement, yeah, because Citrix presents the application as a picture, yeah, not, you don't have access to the native document object models of web apps or, you know, the native screens. So that is important to define up front so you can pick the best platform to support that. And fourth point is, I think what Franco mentioned is the kind of the change management process is very important, because once you train the RPA to work with a certain system, if you start making changes to that system, like in the case of Pharmacare, he mentioned with COVID, they had to make some changes. Then that may affect the RPA. You know, if it introduces new steps in the process or a pop-up or things like that. So it's good to coordinate those changes. ROI is the last section, Michelle. Shall we go through that?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. So Franco, this is you're the CPA.
Okay. Is the slide on? Go ahead, put on the slide. Yeah, real quickly.
It's on the summary.
The question is going to be, what's the benefit of an RPA? And your boss is going to ask you, what's the financial benefit, or what's the return on investment? So I did a quick ROI and 5 metrics or 4 metrics. 5-year cash on cash, it was 728%. That means the RPA cost Pharmacare about $24,000, and after 5 years, the amount of positive cash flow was 7 times the amount of the investment. Net present value is over 5 years. What is in today's dollar? What is the value of this investment? So it's 119,000. Payback period is how long is it going to take to pay for the investment? And this is really fast. It's not even a year. It's less than a year, 9.5 months. And an internal rate of return is a measurement of if you take this money and put it into a bank account, after 5 years, what is your internal rate of return? And for this RPA, it was taking that $24,000, putting it in a bank, earning 138% a year for 5 years to get to that net present value of 119. So next slide.
Okay.
So I have an Excel template that you put in the data and it calculates all of those metrics right there. And the first template is what is your investment? So here the investment for the RPA for DataHouse was $23,686. So you amortize or depreciate that over 3 years. Okay, next slide.
Okay.
So the next tab that I have on the Excel is a cash flow. How much cash is it coming in and how much cash is going out? So sometimes you have a project that increases revenue. Excuse me. But this project here, we're not getting more for the flu shots or the vaccine shots, but we did decrease expenses. So remember that person we hired to transfer the data from the registration forms to the Excel and to the bill manually to the insurance companies? Well, it took about 8 or 9 minutes to do the transfer of information and bill. So this ROI is based on the 6,000 flu shots and 30,000 vaccine shots is 36,000 times 8 or 9 minutes for a year. Divide that by 60 minutes an hour and got about 5,000, a little over 5,000 hours. That equates to about 2.5 full-time people. And we would pay about $12 an hour for these people and add the benefits at 25%. So we'd pay them about $15 an hour with benefits. So at 2,080 hours a year, that came out to about a little over 31,000 a year for each employee. So 2.5 employees, it came out to about 76,000. Our incremental cost was the RPA license, 3,000, the annual support for the RPA, the 8,800, and the JOT form. The JOT form wasn't a capital cost. It was based on the amount of users and a cost per month per user. So our outflow was about 20,000 a year. So in that first year, we got a benefit of 76,000, a cost of 20,000 to it as a net benefit of 56,000. And I just did for the following years a 5% increase in the vaccine shots. And so after 5 years, you got a total of 321,000. So next slide.
Okay.
This is the next tab that has the crunching. It takes all this data and it calculates what our ROI metrics are. And at first here, it's almost like an income statement, right? As your income, your expenses, depreciation, and we even tax affected. You know, what are the taxes you're going to pay on it? So there's that line operating income. That's like your net income off your income statement. Cash flow depreciation isn't a cash expense. So you add that back. And so you can see the cash flow after 5 years is 172,000. The cost of the RPA was 23,000. So how I got 5-year cash on cash of 728 is 172,000 divided by that 23,000. Next slide.
Okay.
So the other 3 metrics, net present value, payback period, and internal rate of return, is all based on cash flow. And present value, $1 1 year from now is not worth $1 today. Example, $1 1 year from now might be worth 94 cents. So if you had $2 this year and next year, you got really in today's dollars, $1.94. So that's what this cash flow presentation is. It takes what the cash flow is in real dollars and it discounts it by the present value, today's dollar. And the discount rate I used was our bank loan, our bank rate. What is our rate, interest rate for bank loans? So when you add all this, that line, net present value, our investment of 23,000 in the RPA is worth actually 119,000, 5 years in today's dollars. The payback period is how long does it take to pay for your investment. The investment, the RPA cost 23,000. You notice the first year, the present value is 30,000. It's more than the RPA cost. So it's about 0.79 years or 9.5 months, which is really fast. And the internal rate of return is, there's a formula for that, but you take the 23,000 and think of it as earning 138% a year for 5 years, so you'll get the 119,000. Okay, next slide, I think, is future plans.
Yeah, this is the last slide.
Okay, so what are the opportunities? I think Clyde really kind of covered it all. You know, billing. Just one thing I want to say about billing is before we engaged DataHouse, I went on a couple of webinars on RPAs, and there was an interesting one on Arkansas Blue Cross Blue Shield, like HMSA, the equivalent of HMSA, and they did 2,000 to 3,000 claims a day. They had an RPA, and it replaced 16 FTEs. And the nice thing about it is they didn't let them go. They redeployed them to more valuable services. So those 16 employees went to client service or collections. Accounting, there's a whole bunch of processes you can do, but operations, you know, the RPA we did was for the retail pharmacy where the vaccinations are. We have the infusion and specialty and nutrition. That's in another company that uses another pharmacy system. And as Clyde said, it's a closed system. You can't interface with it. So we get the orders from hospitals and physicians. For hospitals and some physicians, EMR, medical records, electronic medical records, but a lot of them are from fax. And our people have to take that and manually input it into that pharmacy system because it's a closed system. So I think there's a huge opportunity in doing some kind of RPA or OCR with that. And with that said, I think we'll kind of wrap that up.
Oh, thank you guys. I think this is fascinating, and especially with the numbers, it seems to be it makes a lot of sense, yeah. And we have a few questions from the audience that I'd like to share with you. So the first one is from Pete. You mentioned that there's a lot of future plans there. First, thank you for the great presentation. But what are some of the models that you have for standing up and scaling RPA? So you've done it in one area. Do you know how you're going to scale it across these other areas?
I think we have to work on that, but you know, I think part of it is using this ROI template. You're forced to put in numbers, right? How many transactions, how much time it takes, and whatever this is. And like Clyde said, you got small, medium, and large on there. I think we want to concentrate on the low-hanging fruit, the ones that are easy to get on there. So, you know, for me, I think operations is a big one, right? Operations is the one that brings on the cash. So, you know, getting that physician orders into the pharmacy system, I would work on that. These are just ideas. I haven't started working on them, but after doing the RPA for the flu bill, you know, I think just a huge opportunity there.
Yep, and then efficiency and productivity are the key ones, but then there's also data accuracy, right? Now
Yes.
that there's more stuff that's automated.
Yes.
Yeah, and then, I don't know, Clyde, I know you've done a lot of these with other organizations as well. What do you see as the biggest obstacle for adopting RPA? And then any recommendations for overcoming them?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, finding the right use cases and the right fits for it. Like we talked in our lessons learned, you know, obstacles could be, you know, there's kind of changing requirements or systems, the process not being stable or stable. That, you know, is an obstacle because it would cost, I mean, you would end up, you know, having to pay for constantly changing it, yeah. So I think that's probably one of the biggest ones, but it's kind of going through the considerations for use cases and, you know, making sure you don't encounter some of the obstacles, you know, that we cite.
So you know, from my point of view, when I talk to the operations people, the intake, the one that received the orders, so I asked them about the faxes. I said, you know, we should standardize the fax so all the fields are the same. Then, you know, for OCRing, it would be simpler. And the reply was, oh, good luck. Each physician has their own fax order. You're not going to be able to have them change. So you got that kind of resistance from people, but you can overcome that. Eventually, you can overcome that.
When we were prepping for this session, faxing was, that alone made me.
Yes. Because, you know, I was explaining to Michelle that we get a lot of fax because fax is HIPAA compliant, very easy. When you go through the internet, you got firewalls, you got encryption, you got breaches, a lot more risk over the internet. So, you know, a lot of the old school physicians, they don't have an EMR. They're not going to invest in it. They're close to retirement. So they're going to continue faxing.
Yes, sorry, Clyde, you were going to say something?
Oh, about Franco, you know, brought up the change management, you know, introducing new technology, and I think the approach of, you know, finding the very, you know, easier, smaller use cases just to, you know, try it out so that people can experience it. That, you know, that's an effective way so that, you know, you can introduce it kind of gradually and looking at, you know, low-hanging fruits and things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you get a win, right?
Yeah, and not only for RPA but for any technology. That's true.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That actually brings up another question that came through. Tasks can be automated, but the process of the task itself is changing, right? As you mentioned, with the different vaccines or with different makers and criteria there. How does that impact RPA, and do robots have to learn the new process?
Right. Yeah, that's one of the considerations for use case. If it's not a stable process, yeah, there's going to be need to, you know, retrain and maintain the RPA, and so that's a consideration, you know, to see whether, you know, and using the ROI kind of framework that Franco mentioned, you know, can help, you know, see if the cost to, you know, maintain that and train it, and, you know, offsets the expense, yeah, that you may be saving from, you know, the RPA. Mm-hmm. So it's good to, I think that what Franco shared is probably a good template for not only RPA, for anything.
Mm-hmm. And what RPA?
About sharing the presentation and the ROI template. Mm-hmm. And then Michelle, maybe you can answer that.
Yeah, of course. So after this event, there'll be a posting on our website for this event, and both the presentation and the ROI template will be there.
You just need to make a donation to True for the template.
Stop it. Another question came in. What RPA platform did you choose, and why?
So this one, I can answer this. We used FPT's platform called Akabot, and it's you know, based on the use case that was presented. It's pretty straightforward. So that platform was chosen to match the requirements. But you know, it's not, you know, maybe the best platform for other use cases or platform requirements. So one example might be, you know, Citrix is sometimes, you know, needed to get to applications. And so there's other platforms like UiPath that have, you know, very robust support for, you know, Citrix. So those are just examples of, you know, what goes into considering the platform. It really comes down to understanding the requirements.
Okay, and there's one more question. It's the same question I had, so I wanted to raise it. Dennis asked, how were you able to measure data accuracy in the first year, pre and then post RPA?
Not yet, you know, because we just started the RPA within the last couple of weeks, and then we were stalled because of the COVID changes and the vendor changes and the pop-up screens. But, you know, the return on investment is based, you know, just to let you guys know, is once these issues are settled, I think that's what it'll be. So we haven't been through a whole year yet, but we'll follow up next year.
That sounds great. With that, I've used up everyone's time, so I wanted to thank you both for sharing. What a great presentation and great progress and numbers. I like the numbers that you guys share. So thank you very much for doing that.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. I have a quick close just